Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Nate here, back at you with another video, and this is a video that I've been kind of slowly working on over the past few months, and I'm really excited to finally share it with you. Now, if you don't remember, back in I think it was August, I made a video about a $20 PC that I picked up at Goodwill that I started to pimp out, and I showed you how much of a difference installing a lot of RAM was, and also installing an SSD over an HDD was. And I showed you how much of a performance increase just those simple additions can make. But today, I think it's finally time to actually turn this computer into a full-blown gaming PC, and that's what I did. I went out and ordered a GTX 1050 Ti low-profile graphics card, and as you're gonna see in this video, I ended up having to buy a little bit more than just that. But before we begin, if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more quality content just like this, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, and comment any feedback that you might have for me after you're finished watching this video. Okay, so what actually went down between when I picked this up from Goodwill and I started to do some work on it. As I said before, I added a 120 gigabyte SSD. I made that the boot drive so everything would run a lot smoother, and I also installed more RAM, so now it has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I did a benchmark in that video, and you know, it did okay in Cinebench and a few other benchmarking softwares. I also tried to play CSGO, but I only averaged around, 15 frames per second. So it obviously was not a gaming PC yet, but that's where I wanted to get it. However, I wanted to just get that video out because at the time I wasn't in a position to actually go out and buy all of the other parts yet. I wanted to wait, and now that I've waited and I've actually bought them, it's time to share my experience turning the $20 PC into a around $200 to $250 budget gaming PC that can run a lot of games pretty darn well. So I went out and I bought the GTX 1050 Ti low profile because this computer can't handle any more than that. It can't fit it in the case for one, and it also can't power it because this only has a 250 watt power supply. So I went out and bought that and I installed it, and I ran into a few little problems there because I actually had to take out a bracket because the case was only made for a one slot GPU, and this needed two, so I had to knock that right out in order for it to fit in. But after that hassle, I was finally able to actually put the graphics card in, turn it on, and see how it performed. And obviously, right when I turned it on, I was getting around 100 frames per second in CSGO and around the same in Valorant. And I was very happy with that. But when I looked up what it should be getting, which was around 300 frames per second at low settings in CSGO, I was a little concerned. I had been worried about bottlenecking from the start, but now my worst fears were finally realized because the GPU was capped at around 40%. And the CPU wasn't doing a whole lot. I went to a website that allows you to calculate what percentage of a bottleneck a CPU and GPU pair will give you, and my 4-core Core i3 paired with a 1050 Ti produced a 60% bottleneck, which is not very good at all. So I went on Lenovo's website because the PC that I have is a Lenovo ThinkCentre M81, I believe. And I went on there and I tried to find pretty much the max CPU that I could buy. And right around the max was the Intel Core i5 2500, which only produces around a 5% bottleneck, which is perfect. That's pretty much what you want. So after, trying to fix some things with the PC so I didn't have to actually go out and buy another $40 used CPU, I finally gave up, and you know what? I said, if I'm going to make this a decent PC, I'm going to need to get rid of the bottlenecking, and you know what? I just went out and did it, and now I have an extra Core i3 lying around for future projects, which is kind of nice. So I installed the new CPU, put in new thermal paste, the whole 9 yards, put it in the case, got it all ready, fired it up, and it worked, which was good. I wanted to make sure it at least worked. But although the GPU wasn't bottlenecking anymore, I was getting the 250 to 300 frames per second on low settings on CSGO and around 200 on Valorant, which is very, very good. I also noticed that the CPU was sometimes going around 100%. Now, you want the GPU to be 100% because you want to be utilizing all of the graphical performance you can get. You do not want the CPU at 100% because that means something's wrong. And what was weird with the CPU was that it would go up and down, like fluctuating. It would be at like 10% and then it would go all the way up to 100% at times, which I found very confusing. Also, the temps were not the greatest, but you know, it's in a small case, so you really can't do much with that, and you can't add any more fans as far as I can tell. So I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube, did a deep dive into some of the problems that a CPU might be having. Got the software that tweaks your CPU so that it's utilized to its peak performance, because I do not think this Core i5 can be overclocked, and if it can, the cooling is going to be a nightmare. So at this point, I wouldn't even go there. And I went into the settings even more, and for some reason I was only using one core on this CPU when I should be using all four. And I guess that's sometimes common with older computers because I guess they weren't meant to be used with higher end CPUs like this. So I enabled the 4 cores, and when gaming, the CPU now runs at 60%, 60 to 70 without fluctuating, which is perfectly fine. I'm not really worried about it at this point. For gaming and with a CPU that is pretty old, that is pretty darn good, and without having any bottlenecking, the performance is really amazing with the 1050 Ti. Now granted, it is $150, but it is the best performance that you can get in a GPU that will fit and be compatible with this PC. Now I bet you're wondering about the benchmarks. And previously, if you remember, my PC right out of the box got around a 1200 on 3Mark time spy. And when I installed the RAM and the SSD, that shot up to around 1600. But wait till you hear the increase on the score now. I got around a 2600 on 3DMark time spy with the new CPU and GPU, which is quite a big improvement. And obviously I was expecting that because you're slapping in a completely new GPU into something that was previously just running Intel graphics. And you also bumped the processor because the old processor was only a 2.7 gigahertz and this one is a 3.3 gigahertz. Obviously, that score is not really that impressive in the grand scheme of things. However, for a computer this old and considering all the hurdles that I had to go through, I'm pretty impressed with the final score that this PC got. For $250, you really can't beat the performance that I got from the combination of new and used parts that really came together to make a really great budget PC that you can use for gaming, albeit not really challenging titles, but you can use it for gaming and you might be even able to stream just a tad bit. So if you're broke and you're pretty tech savvy, this whole process might be something you'll want to consider. If you know that you have a thrift store nearby that sells old desktop PCs, or there's always Amazon or eBay that you can check out that people are always selling old PCs for under $50, then I would strongly consider it if you're into tech and you want to build a pretty decent PC for not a lot of money. I had a lot of fun doing this and I hope you guys really enjoyed watching it. As I said before, I did make a video previously that kind of goes into a little bit more detail as to the beginning of this whole thing. So if you want to watch that, I'll have that linked down below as well. But you probably should have watched that before you watch this video. But hey, you know what? There's right now that you can go and do that. And I have a little bit of something special planned for this PC in the future. So also stay tuned for that. I got a lot of cool videos coming up very soon. Thank you all so much for watching. You know what to do, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out, guys.